Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ty, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar, Remote Hiring Strategies for 2021 and Beyond. This event is being presented by HR Morning and is sponsored by eSkill. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel. If they're regarding the subject being presented, I'll add them to the queue for questions at the end. Now I'd like to introduce your speaker, Max Mueller.
Hello, everyone. Let me add my welcome to our program today. A couple of real quick housekeeping things. We're scheduled to run about 60 minutes. If you do have questions, please, you can submit them electronically. We'll do our very best to answer those. And this is a sponsored event today. Our sponsor is eSkill, and they have wonderful employee assessment tests, and I'll tell you more about them as we roll along. But in terms of what we're going to talk about today, let's get into that. You know, the pandemic has really changed the entire way that recruiting and interviewing and everything else goes, because you now have to kind of look for almost an entirely different type of an employee. And so we want to talk about, what all this means to your existing staff and what it means to future hires. And I want to delve into such things as the technologies that are available now, trying to maintain a good corporate culture that is suitable for your own environment, and just the whole communications, the team building, all of those sorts of things. So, having said that, let's go ahead and we'll get ourselves started. In terms of trying to move from where we've been at to where we really need to go, we have to understand that in the past, because we've been dealing with a predominantly on-site workforce, which of course, because of the pandemic, has changed fairly dramatically, we have to move to either an entirely off-site workforce or a hybrid model, which is what many companies are now starting to do. And so we have to remember that, historically, we've had employees that in essence are constantly supervised. And I don't mean that literally, every minute somebody's watching them and so forth, but there is this constant interaction between, management and staff on an ongoing basis. And there's actually, in its own way, peer-to-peer supervision because of interaction in the hallways, the breakout rooms, the cafeteria, and so forth. And so people are basically monitoring each other's activities, which puts pressure on people to actually, do their jobs during regular working hours. In the past, in terms of hiring strategies, many organizations are simply limited by geography in terms of what was available to them in terms of a talent pool. And we're all aware that, again, you'd love to be able to reach out, nationwide, internationally, and so forth to, gain the best talent, which, again, just based on driving distances, other, transportation issues, it's difficult. Now, in the past, historically, you've always had in-person interviewing. And, I've been dealing with HR matters since the 1970s. And I'm an attorney, but a lot of my practice has been around the HR area and, occupational safety and health. Excuse me. And in all these many years, by and large, even though there has been, some degree of remote interviewing in the past, historically until this past year, because of the pandemic, it's always been some version of in person. And then the other thing is, historically, there's been limited software resources that are available other than to the very large organizations in terms of what was available to them. Well, now you have a lot of different scalable types of software that directly go into the hiring process, the HR, managing HR generally, pre-employment assessments, post-employment assessments, assessments and skills testing for existing staff so that you can have a benchmark for new hires and on and on and on. And so the new reality is that many of us now are going to have a hybrid workforce, where in fact jobs that are somewhat sedentary, where someone's working alone, they're working primarily and doing accounting sorts of things. Um, that can very well now start happening remotely. Now, obviously, a number of us have touch labor jobs where some physical, touch labor is involved of one type or another. A human being has to flip the switch, lift the box, drive the forklift, or whatever the case might be. But again, more and more, and I think it's going to accelerate in the fullness of time. Many organizations are going to go to a hybrid model. Now, heretofore, as I mentioned already, you've got people who are in constant contact with their management, and now with this hybrid model or remote in general, now work is going to be more self-directed. And so think about what that might mean to the aptitude, the attitudes of a workforce in terms of being more self-reliant as opposed to people who heretofore have been directed or told what to do or were waiting for instructions from others for whatever reason, internal political politics or whatever. They were afraid to make decisions on their own, and now they're being forced into it. Also, now we have the ability to have an absolutely unlimited recruitment range. Again, whether it's now it might be more local, but now we can go regional, we can go nationally or internationally, depending on your needs. And then there's all kinds of new modalities in terms of how you do an interview, and I'll talk about those as we roll along. Obviously they're still going to be in person, but more and more there's going to be a simulated co-presence by using remote tools, Zoom and WebEx and things like that. But there's also some variations on that I'm going to get into. And then finally, there are now affordable and scalable software resources where if you don't have much of a budget for these things, there's going to be something available to you. Those of you that have the ability, availability both intellectually within your organization and then just obviously the financial resources to get software that is more elaborate and what have you, that's all available now. And I'll tell you, truly, the HR world has changed. And some of you might actually have a book that I wrote for SHRM a number of years ago, The Manager's Guide to HR. And again, I've been dealing with this stuff since the mid 1970s. And I simply don't know how someone who is involved in HR can really do things anymore without actually going to relational databases. Before you've got filing systems for data where everything sort of stands alone, and you look at file series and what have you, and there's a limited amount of metadata that's attached to a new hires file or an existing workers file. Well, now with relational databases, there's all sorts of things that you can do to track, the new hires, the onboarding, what's happened with that person on an ongoing basis. So anyway, look, things have changed. And more than 80% of company leaders, they plan to permit employees to work remotely at least part of the time. At least part of the time. Now, this is, by the way, is based on a survey that was done in July of 2020. But based on my own experience with my own clients, I think that these numbers are still pretty true. 47%, let's say 50% of respondents intend to allow employees to work remotely on a full-time basis. And for all the reasons that are well known to all of us, people are happier working at home. There's no commute. They're saving time and money and gasoline. An organization can reduce its physical footprint as far as having full-blown facility and with all the costs that go along with a building and lease, etc. 43% would allow at least some flex days and or flex hours, again allowing for remote work. Now, it's interesting that a majority of the respondents aren't worried about maintaining productivity under this hybrid workforce model. Let me tell you though, kind of a corollary to that. A lot of organizations are in fact though worried about maintaining corporate culture. That's a big deal. That really is a big deal. And it's one of the reasons that organizations like Yahoo and Reddit and Best Buy, places like that, they've actually stopped the as much remote work as possible. They want to bring people back in. The decision making is faster. It's easier to maintain a corporate culture, and so forth. So there's kind of a conflict floating around out there now. Uh, this nearly 30% are concerned about maintaining corporate culture. I think that that number is higher now. Now that people are more experienced with this, remote worker thing, and a lot of workers are burnt out. They're burnt out on Zoom calls. They're burnt out on trying to, hunt down their uh, coworkers to get an immediate response on something. And I know there's all kinds of tools now, Basecamp and other things that immediately allow for interactivity and what have you. But those very tools, people get a little tired of it, and also they basically get tired of a lot of interruptions where someone constantly interrupts them to ask this, or their system dings and draws their attention to it, etc. And then finally, 61 of the respondents have implemented frequent check-ins between employees and managers, and that is important. I think that's a good thing as far as keeping track of things. Now, everyone, there's an article that I think is really a very good article, and it's in the Harvard Business Review. It's why remote work thrives in some companies and fails in others. And so I'll leave it to your own judgment as to whether or not you want to read that. It's a quick read, but it's very interesting, and it does talk about some of the conditions to make sure that you're successful if you are using either remote work entirely, or a hybrid model. Now, remember what we're talking about here in this particular program. We're talking about sort of how to revise our thinking about the hiring process. And all of this, I think, has to be factored into it, because really, because of the pandemic, we're not going backwards. So in terms of sort of, I don't know, recalibrating your thinking and what have you, I think you have to ask yourself, what types of workers am I trying to recruit? What types? Now, obviously, there's some things that are pretty straightforward. I need an accounting person. Okay, so there's a easily defined set of things that we're going to be looking for, a certain mindset and what have you. But if you take the time, excuse me, to actually get down into who am I looking for, then you can figure out if the way you're trying to recruit actually makes sense. When you post a job, are you doing it on channels where you're targeting candidates that actually would meet your criteria? You know, just simply throwing stuff out there on the common job boards might not be cutting it. There's all kinds of associations, there's all kinds of networks that are out there, networks for doctors and networks for IT people and networks for this and networks for that. And so you really do have to ask yourself, are you just, as I say, just kind of throwing things, out there on the internet, hoping people, find you? I think you have to make it easy for them to really find you, and to find you interesting as an employer. And so truly, you need to, slow down, and that'll actually speed up your process. The special forces have a saying. It's you know, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think that's a worthwhile thing. So let's slow down. Let's really think about, who are we trying to hire, and where are you trying to actually find these people. There's different types of workers that are out there. And there's people who are actively looking for things, looking for new opportunities, and of course those are actually the easiest to reach. I'll tell you though, you've got people that are passive. They're not actively looking, but would move for the right opportunity. And there was a LinkedIn study that showed that really, um, people that are already employed, that there's a low percentage, I think it was like 12%, 14%, something like that, that uh, that were really looking, that they're already employed. But informally, they're keeping their eyes open. They were talking to their own social networks. They were talking to recruiters. They would, you keep looking around. And if my memory serves me right, and I think I'm correct, the number was 71%. This was a LinkedIn study that was done a few years ago. And so we want to find those people. We want to find those people. And that's why I'm saying that honestly, in kind of, redirecting your future efforts as far as recruiting, the active people, again, kind of the traditional paths. But those same paths that you're out there, you want to make yourself attractive to, the type of work you'd be interested in. So, are you putting out, blog articles and things like that in areas that where you want to recruit from, so that again, you've identified these active areas, these niche networks and things like that. But what are you doing to create a presence there where these people that are kind of quasi looking and what have you are finding you, and they're finding you interesting because your company's out there and you've become an employer of choice, so that maybe they do see something from you that makes you interesting to them, so that when they do want to actively look, you're top of mind. Then one of the most overlooked areas of recruiting are your own existing workers. And I do want to talk about skills tests. I mentioned that a moment ago. And, you know, a lot of times people have skill sets within your own organization, but you haven't tracked it. When you first interviewed them, you were familiar with their resume, they had an interesting background, they've learned a lot while they've been working for you and what have you. But then once that's over, you don't really, I mean, you pay attention to them, I mean, obviously on an ongoing basis, but you don't really think of them anymore as being an applicant or as a candidate for a job opening. Now, I'm urging you to do that, to begin to ask yourself who within my organization has the knowledge, the skills, the aptitudes, and other characteristics I need for this particular job. And we're going to talk about KSAOs, CASOs, in just a minute: knowledge, skills, aptitude or attitude, and other characteristics. So you don't overlook what you already have, within your own organization. And think about it. They know your organization. You know them. You know whether or not they fit the culture. There's no big learning curve. You're certainly saving a ton of money and time if you already go, with someone that's already, in-house and what have you. I do want to warn you about something that I've noticed in the fullness of time. Supervisors do not want to lose their talented people. And so you've got to be careful that supervisors, you go to a supervisor and just say, hey, do you think Mary would be good for, such and such a job? And they might say, well, I don't know, Mary this, and, I'm pretty happy with her where she's at. I'm just not sure she would fit and all that. And really, they're being self-serving. They just don't want to let, Mary go. That's what that boils down. And so, um, make your own decisions, I guess is what I'm saying. That sure, you want input from supervisors and so forth, but do remember there might actually be an intellectual conflict of interest going on there. Another thing is this thing about referrals. You know, another, I believe, overlooked area of really, recruiting, particularly for the future, is this whole referral thing. And one of the problems that people have generally is, organizations, as far as their recruiting and hiring practices, they don't really use data analytics. I mean, they really don't, and you really, really should. There's various things that you should track, and among them would, in fact, be how many of your successful new hires were from a referral. That's a metric you really do need to track. And if it's a pretty low number, you might want to make sure that people within your organization know about upcoming opportunities. Um, Internal ladders. Internal ladders are, a pathway to advancement, so that your existing workers themselves know that, hey, I could do this, I could do that, but also, I've got a friend that would be interested in this other thing. And you know, because a lot of people, a lot of organizations, they're not tracking their hiring outcomes they're missing the boat. And what I recommend, one second, please, everyone. Sorry about that. Allergies. um, some of the things that I urge my own clients to track is time to fill, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but also the referral rate. I really think that that's something you need to pay attention to. I think you should pay attention to cost per hire. I think you should pay attention to the source per hire. So when you look at the various sources, the various places you're putting your job adverts, the interactions you have on the internet, so on and so forth, how's that working out for you? And then your turnover rate, you know, in terms of new hires, how long do they stay? In other words, if you take the well, it's just basically high school math. I mean, it really, HR analytics is really just high school math. It's where it's a division problem. So the numerator is a subset of something, and the denominator is the total population of something. So you divide the subset by the total amount, bingo, now you've got a percentage. And so what I'm saying is, if we get down into it and we say, okay, we take um, the amount of time people have been with our organization. We figure out that our average length of time that people stay with our organization is 7 years. Let's say, I'm just pulling this out of the sky. So let's say it's 7 years. So then we begin to, and by the way, what you would do is, you would take the total amount of time people have worked for you, divide it. I'm sorry, you take the subset you're looking for, like, you know, people, 20 to 30, how long have they been with us? 45 to 70, how long have they been with us? And so you have a subset, and then you divide it by the total number, and so forth. So anyway, you want to do those kinds of things, for the different sources. You want to do it for the length of time that a new hire stays with you. We want to track in terms of internal promotions, how many of our people have been promoted internally versus us hiring from the outside. And there are certain HR dashboards that you really should be tracking all the time. And it would be cost per hire, length of time to hire. It would be, how many women in advanced positions versus the total number of workers in those positions, all of those kinds of things, age group things and so forth. Turnover rate is really a big one. That's a big one. And so if you're not already tracking these things, again, there's so much software available now that it is even funny that would allow you to do this easily and conveniently. And a lot of it, it's all set up. The defaults are in there. It's just a matter of taking the metadata and attaching it to people, your new hires and or your existing staff, so that you can really generate out reports that allow you to track people in the fullness of time. And remember, I'm going to say it again because I really believe in this. A lot of times organizations are not, they're basically overlooking their internal staff. And if they would just do tracking of them, if they would do periodic assessments to see where they're at as far as their knowledge, and could that knowledge be used somewhere else? Can their skill set be transferred over to a different department? Really missing the boat. Now, you need to cut down on the number of times you have to hire, because really the average cost of hiring is astronomical. And these numbers that I want to share with you, they're well-known numbers. It's nothing that I basically I've made up or anything. And so the average cost to hire is about $4,000, and it takes about somewhere between 42 to 50 some odd days to fill a position. So the more often you have to hire, really, that's a bad thing. I mean, it really is. And when you say, well, what goes into all those costs? We'll think about it. And by the way, the longer it takes you to hire someone, the more it costs you. And you think about the advertising, what you're doing there, the time it takes to interview, the loss in productivity while you get someone up to speed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And overtime for other workers if you don't have someone internally, and so on and so forth, really is a big deal. And so whatever we can do to cut down on that, that's a good thing, very good thing. Now, in terms of some of these metrics that I'm urging you to to take a look at time to fill versus time to hire. And time to fill is the entire recruiting process from posting a new job opening to actually extending an offer. So there has to be, first of all, the recognition either that there is a need, or if you're tracking your metrics, that you see that there's been an influx in business, that productivity is being hurt because you simply don't have enough warm bodies. It's like one of my clients, had part of their operation was a call center, and so they were tracking the average number of calls that each representative was handling, each operator, if you will, that each associate was handling, and the average length of time that a call was taking. They also were tracking how long people would stay on the line on hold before they'd hang up. So their business happily increased, and yeah, what's coming. That as business increased, the workload, as far as the number of calls per hour, increased, but then it hit a peak. And if you looked at average times, I mean, obviously some operators are rock stars. They can handle a large number of calls. They're experienced. They're able to answer questions very, very quickly. They know who's in the organization, and they almost have memorized all the extension numbers. They can transfer quickly, blah blah blah. And then you've got the people who maybe aren't that fast, or they're new, or they're not as knowledgeable, whatever. So anyway, the ultimate, and where I'm going with this, is that they hit basically a new average, and they were not happy with it, because the more they put people on hold because people could not handle the volume, all right, they noticed that people were hanging up. They weren't willing to stay on hold for as long as in the past, because in the past they'd been able to spin through things very, very quickly. So they knew that they now needed to hire up. So they recognized a current need, but then they projected, in the fullness of time, okay, here's where we're headed, and therefore really our staffing complement needs to be increased by whatever the number was. And so this time to fill, you can reduce it, all right, by number one, recognizing early that you have a need, or projecting a need that allows you then to do a better job of recruiting more quickly. Also, if you'll break down your whole recruiting process internally, you're going to find areas where there's low hanging fruit. By simply just changing this or that or the other, you're going to speed things up. And everyone, there's no magic to this. If you change a procedure, a form, anything like that, and you save 30 seconds every 5 minutes, what you're going to end up having is, a savings on that of like 42 to 47, minutes per day. And think about what I just said. Save 30 seconds every 5 minutes, and you're going to save between, if you're talking about a 7 hour day or an 8 hour day, you're going to be talking about a savings of 42 to 47 minutes. All right. So really, that's a big deal. It really is a big deal. And my point, I'm going to summarize. I want to make sure that I made my point clearly. The idea is that if you look at your process, I'll say it again, you're going to find some low hanging fruit, some places where you can speed something up, change your process, eliminate someone, recognize that something is laying on someone's desk for, that person is a bottleneck, they're holding up the process, and you can speed that up. And everyone, honestly, this whole webinar is directed to the future. It's like, what can we do in the future? How can we rethink our current processes? Really take a look at them. And everyone hates change, but to go with your existing status quo really isn't going to serve you well in the future, because again, the pandemic has changed everything. Now, the other thing is time to hire. And this is once people have applied for the job. Well, what's your internal processing time? The exchange of emails, setting up an interview, and so forth. I've had clients in the fullness of time where I always get this thing about, well, I'm too busy. a decision maker, a critical decision maker will not make the time available. Well, I'm too busy, or they artificially limit the amount of time per interview. And so they basically are, they harm the entire effort, which needs to be, thoughtful, thorough, focused, um, where you're asking, performance-based questions, which take time to formulate, as opposed to these silly questions that tell you nothing. Well, where do you want to be in 5 years? And those kind of unfocused, questions that are not really probative of anything. They don't focus in on a specific job. So the time it takes internally to extend an offer after people have applied for a job, so it's a subset of the overall process. Take the time to look at it. And I know that what I'm talking about is time consuming, but everyone, the more time you take on the front end, the less time it's going to take on the back end, and the better your result. And there's the old military saying, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war, and that's really just pretty true. So there you go. Anyway, you also want to improve your retention. And I've already kind of used that phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So hiring smartly, doing pre-employment assessments and testing, and making sure your job descriptions are good, and that you've analyzed the skill sets that go along with the job, and all of that takes time. But again, if you hire a little more slowly, and again, you're saying, but Max, a minute ago you said to speed it up. Yes, speed it up within reason. Absolutely. Absolutely, you want to speed it up by taking out the bottlenecks and things of that nature. But you don't want to go so fast that, again, you're rushing the process, where you say, I need to have that warm body. I need to have that warm body. And I'm guessing that a number of you have had a situation where someone says to you, so and so didn't get a paycheck. And you go, who's so and so? And what happened is that you needed someone so quickly that people internally didn't do the paperwork. They didn't get the I-9. They didn't get the W-4. I mean the W-4 and what have you. And so they didn't do the paperwork. And so your payroll people don't even know the person exists and what have you. And so by going too fast, a lot of those internal errors pop up. Now, you do want to, if someone doesn't work out, you want to know that. If you have good criteria, if you have good rubrics, in other words, decision metrics, then you're going to be able to let someone go very quickly if, in fact, it's obvious they're not going to work out. If you hire smart, you're going to fire less, you're going to have less turnover. Now, everyone, early on, I talked about the fact that you need to build a brand. And you want to be out there in the places where the type of worker you want, that's where they hang out. And so you want to have strong branding in those areas. Influencer marketing, in terms of being an influencer in your own industry, and obviously, having a blog, getting articles, published, being a presence on Facebook, a presence in LinkedIn, and again, taking the time takes time, to do this. My own organization is a small consulting organization, training organization, but we try to be an influencer by actually, doing these sorts of things that I'm talking about. Now, you do want to have a good website presence. I'm as guilty as anyone else. I've got a website, and, maybe I need to pay a little more attention to keeping it up to date, having, more drop down menus, more things it can do. But you really want to pay attention to it. You don't want to just be satisfied with, yeah, well, I paid some person and they developed it and it looks nice, got some, some pretty pictures and what have you. But you want to make sure that you have a strong website presence. Now, part of that is having self-service portals, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. But I said at the very beginning of my presentation, I simply don't know how anyone can really run an HR department anymore, without having up-to-date, software availability to them to do onboarding, tracking, things of that nature. And if there are self-service portals that are used by managers, where they can get information, submit information, where you can go into a distributed environment where the employees themselves or applicants can go in and look at, you know, your handbook and look at this and fill out this paper and fill out that paper and all that. The more of that you can do, that's a strong website presence. Email marketing, you know, what's your strategy there? And that strategy when it comes to hiring and recruiting and retention and all the rest of it is that you don't ignore the people that have gone to the time and trouble to apply for a job. If in fact you've hired someone, then let the others know. You thank you for submitting. You know, we've filled it at this time. We respect and appreciate the time you took to apply, and so forth. All right. And then you know, sharing content online about your organization, what you do, that's informative, that sure you want to put your own product line out there, your services out there and so forth, but if you do it in an informative manner where someone, you know, reads your article, basically reads your advertising material, but they walk away with a new idea, with a new approach, that's good. That's very, very good. Some organizations have gone to like contests, especially for like, you know, uh, people that are either recent college graduates or going to be, uh, graduating, where they say, you know, submit 10 ideas, you know, and you'll get XYZ and so forth. So they get interested. There's a, you know, an immediate benefit to them and what have you, and it'll draw them to your organization and so forth. All right, so live streaming, etc. So anyway, the bottom line is you need to engage your potential hires. Now, one of the most important things you can do is pay a lot of attention to your job description. Very, very important. And then you want to obviously post it, extend the offer, notify candidates the position is filled. So let me get more into the details about that. One of the most important things is to analyze your job and extract from it. Because remember, listen, that you know, a job, position description is a summary. I mean, it really is. It's a summary. So we want to extract from that, though, what is the knowledge someone has to have, the hard knowledge they have to have to do this particular job. You know, um, I mentioned to you, I'm an attorney. I'm also an OSHA authorized outreach trainer, in general industry outreach trainer. So the thing is, ask yourself, okay, what kind of knowledge does Max have to have? Well, I need to have knowledge of the law. But you know, the laws become specialized. Do I need to have domestic relations knowledge about the laws there? Do I need patent and trademark knowledge? You know, what kind of knowledge do I have to have? So it isn't just a matter of, oh, Max is a lawyer. Everyone, the reality is, you know, I've been an attorney since 1974, probably before many of you were born. But anyway, you know, as a young attorney, I handled my fair share of, divorces and other domestic relations things. Truly, I haven't handled a divorce, I bet you, in 35 years. I don't know anything about it. Now, if you ask me something about, you know, HR, oh, hey, there you go. I'm, you know, ready to go there. So again, what kind of knowledge actually fits? What do you need? What are the skill sets? What's the skill set? With what I do, my ability to communicate both verbally and orally, that's a big deal. That's a necessary thing for what I do for a living, not only as a consultant, which, you know, there's all kinds of consultants, many of which are in the back room, you never see them, and their skill set could be research, their skill set could be, you know, drafting materials and what have you. Given again what I particularly do, I have to be, excellent, both, verbally as well as in writing. And so, you know, again, what skill set is necessary for your particular job? And then, aptitude, attitude, etc. So it all begins with really understanding where I'm coming from in terms of, you look at the job description and then you extract out of that what knowledge, what skill, what ability or aptitude, either one of those words generally are appropriate there, and other characteristics does someone need. And so knowledge, those are the things a person needs to know in order just to perform the job effectively. Then we come to proficiency. And everyone, there's a real difference there in those things. It's like, look, let's say I want to hire someone that's going to be using Excel a lot, you know, the spreadsheet program. Okay. So I advertise, and one of the things it says in the job advert is must know the Microsoft Office suite of products, and what have you. So someone ticks off the box, yes, I know how to use Excel. All right, so they have the knowledge, they know what Excel is. The thing is, at what level of proficiency? If I'm looking for someone that can merely pull up an existing spreadsheet and repopulate the cells with new data, that's one level of proficiency. But what if I want someone that can at least create simple spreadsheets on their own with basic formulas? Different level of proficiency. But what if I'm really looking for a rock star? What if I'm looking for someone that can create multiple spreadsheets that basically update fields in one another when one is changed, so that if I change a field in spreadsheet one, that it then updates data in spreadsheet number three, and so forth. So different levels of proficiency. So there's that skill set thing. Then you've got ability. Now this is, and again, you can also substitute the word aptitude. It's basically the ability to acquire new knowledge or to use existing knowledge and existing skills in a different way. And when you think about, if you're looking at a whole bunch of resumes and what have you, someone might not have the exact skill set that you're looking for, but then you look at what they've done in their life, the other skills they have, and you say, you know what? I think that this is close enough to where this person can be trained into this. Or right now they're a little bit rough, but once we bring them in here and we show them our formats, our style, our color palette, our this, our that, that I think this person can learn quickly. It's something to really focus on. And then you've got the other characteristics, which in no way, even though they're last on the list, they're just as important as many of these other things. And it would be work attitudes, and it would be personality and their personal values. And do you remember I said just a moment ago that really, when you're interviewing, you need to use performance-based interviewing. It's where you actually ask them questions that delve into what have they done before in situations that are similar to the things you're going to have them do. Instead of hypotheticals, it's where you say, tell me about a time when you, tell me about a time, demonstrate for me, list out for me, and so forth. And so, I've mentioned, pre-employment skills tests and assessment tests and simulations and all of those kinds of things. That's how you get to these things that are a little bit more amorphous, a little bit harder to wrap your mind around. How do you figure out someone's attitude? How do you figure out their personality? Well, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Now, I keep coming back to job descriptions because I think they're so incredibly and vitally important. Because think about it, there is sort of your foundation stone to screen people. I mean, it really is. And you put something out there, in come a bunch of applications, or in come a bunch of resumes and what have you. So how do you screen? Well, you go back to the job description. It also sets up the basis to ask interview questions that, once again, are performance based because they relate back to the actual job. With the past, being an indicator. By the way, it, you know, when people talk about performance-based interviewing, sometimes they say, yeah, it's a predictor of future decision making and activity. I don't. I personally don't believe that it's a predictor. I think it's an indicator. But someone who's young in their career, they're going to process information much differently than when they're more mature in their career. And so, some of the things they did, 2 years ago in a similar situation may or may not be how they would handle it right now. Okay, so again, indicator, not necessarily a predictor. Also, in terms of making a decision, okay, I'm going to hire Mary. Well, your higher ups might say, why? So we want to write down our interview notes and say, you know, Mary has done something similar, et cetera, or, Mary actually was in this group, or whatever it is. So it helps you write post-interview notes that justify either hiring or not hiring, either opting in or opting someone into the final candidate pool or opting them out, as the case might be. And then just daily management. Daily management. One of the worst things in the world is when I teach classes on performance evaluation. I'll ask the reviewer, when was the last time you actually read your direct report's job description? When was the last time you helped HR keep that job description up to date so that you yourself have a benchmark as to the different things the person's supposed to be doing, that you've set benchmarks? How are you supposed to assess someone? All right. How are you supposed to view them even on a daily basis without setting the benchmarks, which come back to the job description? All right. So job descriptions are a summary, but they do define the minimum performance expectations. Very important. Now, I want to give you, I want to mention a resource to you, and I love this resource. It's free, absolutely free. The uh, the the government put together a couple of websites, and they're put together by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. One of them is called ONET Online, and the other one is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. ONET Online has over like 900 different occupations broken down into subsets, and what they've done is they lay them out in terms of, I'm going to go to my next slide. I'm going to come back to this slide just one second. What they've done is they've laid it out in a written format, and it goes into the KSAOs. All right, it goes into the abilities, it goes into the activities, it goes into other things, and it's a wonderful, wonderful way of beginning to figure out what needs to go into a job description. What should I put in there? What should I take out? Now, a lot of times there's so much data here that you don't want to go with everything, because a lot of it you're going to find it might not be relevant to your own specific needs. But as far as a starting point to either write something from scratch or to revise and update, an existing job description, boy, this is great. And again, I mean, it's free. Hey, can't beat that. Now, I do want to, I'm coming back to my previous slide, because the Occupational Outlook Handbook, I believe it's published every 2 years, I believe. And what that does is it has these individual, occupations, and it describes them. It's like an article or a white paper or something like that, on, various things. And they talk about salary ranges, whether the outlook for that particular job or occupation is bright or if it's dimming, things of that nature. So these two together really are a wonderful source of information, and I truly believe that it will help you in your future recruiting. And if in fact you're going to do pre-employment screening, if you're going to do pre-employment assessments, testing, simulations, and things of that nature, boy, not bad at all. Not bad at all. Okay. Now, the better match between your needs and the person's KSAOs, the more likely it is they're going to perform well in the job. Truly. Does it take time to do all of this? I'm going to say it again. I've said it earlier, because I want to acknowledge it. I don't want this to all be theoretical and, oh gosh, this is just great and it happens easily and all that. No, it takes work, but the outcomes are a better workforce, a more productive workforce, people who like working together. They respect each other. They the team building happens almost naturally. It's almost like an organic process and what have you. But it takes time to set that up, to set basically the infrastructure for it. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and move forward. I made a big pitch a little while ago for you to hire from within. And I want to reinforce what I said. The less time it takes to hire, the less money it's going to cost you. The better your productivity, and what have you. It's just better all the way around. It also avoids bidding wars for talent, um, because a lot of people, basically lost their jobs. There's an awful lot of people out there looking. Well, the more talented ones, um, you know, they're people want them, all right, and they're willing to pay for them. But if you have someone internally that already understands, internally pretty much, what you're willing to pay, and what have you, it's easier to deal with that than it is to go all the way through an interview process, have this wonderful candidate, you're really excited, you offer them the job, and then they don't take it. So you wonder why. Well, you're in a bidding war, or they ghost you. That they really wanted you to make them an offer that they can then shop to other people. And you know I don't know how many times over the years this has either happened with organizations that I personally either was an executive with, or that companies that I owned, or people that I've done consulting and legal work for. I honestly, I've lost track of the number of times someone will they'll be made an offer and then they'll shop it. Really, that's it. It's that simple. And you're going to have a lot less of that if you're hiring from within. Obviously, it improves retention. It shortens the learning curve on how things operate in your organization. It improves morale, which again is another kind of nebulous idea. Oh, morale and all. Well, the thing is, the happier people are working for you, the less turnover you're going to have. It's really that simple. And so basically, again, you want to become an employer of choice, so that even if somebody's offered, a couple of dollars more or whatever to go somewhere else, they go, you know what, I'm going to stay here because I'm happy. I like it here. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move ourselves forward. Two ways of finding internal talent proactively, and this is what I recommend. It's where you constantly monitor your people, and again, you can do this by periodically testing their abilities, and additional training, and what have you. And so you've basically got this bench. You're building a bench to where when there's an opening, you go to the people you have, the information you already have. And then obviously there's the reactive approach, which there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, in terms of, oh, is there something wrong with that? No. And often you needed to use both, the proactive approach and the reactive approach, both together. It could well be that truly you've overlooked someone that has a particular skill set. I remember that years ago, after one of the hurricanes, I had a client that was putting together a disaster recovery plan because they were pretty much devastated by something. This was in Arkansas. Actually, it was a tornado that destroyed their building and what have you. So anyway, so they decided, boy, we're going to put together a disaster plan and all that. So we were talking about the different roles that people would play, and who were we going to put in charge of rendering first aid and being first responders and all that. Well, lo and behold, one of their workers, who just was a warehouse type person, had been a medic in the Marine Corps. And so there you go. I mean, his job had nothing to do with medicine and what have you, but given this background he had with being a medic in the military, that's the guy they put in charge of that team, so that if there was a disaster, he was number one. He was the guy who was going to make the decisions and handle it, etc. So again, use both approaches. In terms of posting the job, obviously we want to disseminate it in the pathways where the people we're interested in, where do they hang out? And so there's that. The other thing is, I urge you as strongly as I can say it without being melodramatic, make your application process easy. Don't have a lot of complex things. Don't demand, all kinds of documents immediately on the front end. You know, any of you that have ever tried to approach the federal government for a job under USA Jobs, you know how incredibly tedious it is, how much paperwork there is, how many, documents you have to have and what have you. It drives you crazy. Don't do that. If you need that information, fine, but downstream. But make the entry easy. Help people get to yes. Then the pre-employment screening, the pre-employment assessments, and everyone I feel strongly about this. Yes, I am. Am I speaking on behalf of eSkill, our sponsor? Sure, I am. But just the whole nature of this industry of screening products that are out there, they're incredibly worthwhile. They will reduce your time in terms of hiring. You're going to make better hires, and you're going to make them more quickly, and they're going to stay with you longer. It really is just that simple. Now, a lot of these, applicant screening and applicant tracking systems, they do have built-in shortlisting and resume and cover letter screening and what have you. And they do this a lot of times by keywords. One of the things that, in terms of just screening generally, is your job description obviously is going to have some keywords that are associated with the KSAOs and what have you. And so the better resumes are the ones that they've actually paid attention to the job description, and they'll put in those kind of keywords or synonyms. Now you do have to be careful. A lot of people are smart now, and they word bomb their cover letter and their resume. So there's a little bit of an issue there. But honestly, these things can these software products, they they have the keywords, they have the synonyms and what have you, and they very quickly will help you with the screening, getting down to an applicant pool. They'll let you put in your own keywords. They have a lot of defaults in them and what have you. What I've always found interesting, they can also grade your applicants, which means you have to, guide the system, of course, in your rubrics, your decision making. What's more important to you than something else. Okay. The world has changed. 70% of employers do some sort of job skills testing. A lot of them use personality and psychological tests. 41% basic literacy and math skills and what have you. And this is based on numbers from the American Management Association. And so there's nothing wrong with this. And all these things, by and large, the big companies, reputable companies, they're all tested in accordance with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's guidelines. Okay. It allows you to do the screening of large pools of applicants very, very quickly. And by the way, it basically assures that people can perform the essential functions. Okay, it's really that simple. You do want to hire based on interviewing and testing for both soft and functional skills. So soft skills, hard skills. So past behaviors is an indicator of future behavior in specific situations, interaction with others, but then also the concrete technical skills. Can they do this? Can they do it quickly? Can they do it efficiently? All right, what do they know? Okay, all kinds of tests, psychological, aptitude, physical, and so forth. Now, you on your own, good luck with being able to come up with this on your own. Now, you do want to maybe take a look at the types of software that I'm talking about. And, our sponsor, eSkill, they have a library of over 600 subjects, 5,000 subtopics, and over 1,200 standard tests. And the really nice part of this is you can mix and match. They have modular ones for a specific subject matter area. You can mix and match and create your own things. And of course, they have expertise in helping you. For any of you that are interested in that, I really would urge you to look at this and stay with us. I want to talk about proctored testing and the distance. I want to talk a little bit more about remote interviewing. So stay with us. Don't jump off the call right now, please. And in terms of about eSkill, they've got a complete software suite. It's complete, it's customizable, and what have you. All kinds of clients that use this, and many of these, of course, are huge. FedEx, etc. But also, this is a scalable product. All right, it's a scalable product. So if you do have an interest, why don't you give them a call? And their website, eSkill.com, they can help you out. Now, I want to talk about, proctoring. If you're doing these things remotely, and the software allows you to supervise the employment testing process through video, and there's various ways of doing that. so you can actually watch people, make sure that someone else isn't taking the test for them, etc. Now, in terms of what's going on these days with interviewing generally, you've got interactive and one-way platform, so the Zoom sort of thing. But you also have where questions are audio pre-recorded, and then the person responds to them. Then they submit that video to you, or they do it on your system, so you've captured it. That allows them to take this information and handle it in an asynchronous manner. In other words, there doesn't have to be a defined and set time for these things to actually take place. So it frees you up. It allows you to handle these things asynchronously, and it allows the person to actually, take the interview whenever they're available. Remember, you're now going to be looking at people all over the country, all over the country. So you've got different time zones, etc. And this allows you to thoughtfully, carefully come up with these questions. Again, it's an audio thing. You could even have it where on your end, it's a video of the questioner, again, kind of creating this simulated co-presence. Then the person reacts. And then the other thing is where you send written questions to the person, and then they respond on camera to it. So those last two are becoming more and more kind of not the norm, because the norm is still the 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 things where it's over WebEx or Zoom or something like that. But these other two modalities, other ways of doing it, is really great, because again, it frees up the applicant to do the interview at their leisure, and you to review it at your leisure. A couple of good ways to do it. All right. So anyway, if you have any comments, if you have any questions of a general nature, you might want to reach out to me, Max at maxmuellerassociates.com. My last name, although it's pronounced Mueller, spelled like Muller, M-U-L-L-E-R. So anyway, so Max at maxmuellerassociates.com. If you do want more information about the various things that are really available to you in terms of pre-employment and post-employment skills testing, assessments, simulations, and what have you, contact our sponsor, all right, eSkill.com. All right. Well, listen, thank you so very much for being with us. I'm going to hand this back over to our moderator, Tyrone.
Thank you, Max. And on behalf of HR Morning, I would also like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. This concludes our program.